So we left Oregon, huh? What?
Stop.
We stopped.
We need to introduce ourselves first.
Oh, okay.
We haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Okay.
What's your name?
Hi, I'm Tanya.
I'm Steve.
You're not Steve.
And that's not really Tanya either. But anyway. Anyway, we left.
No, we
What?
have to introduce ourselves.
I just did.
It's like our first video. No, you didn't. Hi, I'm Tanya. This is my husband, John. Not Steve. John.
Anyway, we're from Oregon, and we left Oregon in September, and then we headed down towards El Paso. On the way there, we discovered that we weren't too far from what was the name of that park?
Mesa Verde.
Mesa Verde Park. And so we Tanya navigated and planned, and we ended up staying in a boondocker's welcome for a night, and then we moved from there to the park, the RV park there at the park, and it wasn't bad, but
The campground.
the campground, yeah.
Not an RV park.
Well, yeah, you're right. It was campground. So, but it wasn't that great. I mean, we had a hard time finding a place to park that was
A
big
level
enough,
spot.
a level spot, and no hookups that we had anyway. And so anyway, but the park was really nice. And then she's got some pictures she's going to show you about that. And then, do you want to talk about El Paso now or what?
No,
Okay, I just want to talk about the park now.
we're just going to talk about Mesa Verde.
Okay, so then she's going to show you some pictures now of the Mesa Verde, and we recommend you guys all visit. Is there anything else you wanted to say before you do the narration of the pictures?
No,
Okay, that's it. I'm Steve. That's Tanya.
you're not Steve. Quit telling people you're Steve.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's it.
As John said earlier, we stayed at a boondocker's welcome in Yellow Jacket, Colorado the night before we went into Mesa Verde National Park. We obviously picked Bandit Boulevard since that was our puppy's name. It was a big farm with extra large pull-through sites. We were able to see quite a bit of the surrounding country from here, including Sleeping Ute Mountain, so named because from a distance it looks like a chief sleeping on his back with his arms folded over his chest. There was very little light pollution out here, and we were able to get a great view of the night sky. The next morning, we got up and went to see the canyons of the ancients. I took this picture of the bug house so that the grandkids and I can make one this summer. The Dominguez Pueblo was a very small pueblo with only 3 rooms located between the parking lot and the museum. Inside the museum, we saw many tools and artifacts that were found near the museum when they were excavating a nearby reservoir. I took a picture of this tool because last summer our grandson found a rock, cut a branch off a tree, and made this very tool when he was camping with us. Inside the museum, they've built a diorama to see exactly how the Pueblos lived in this area for about 700 years. Some excavated areas were intact when they discovered them, giving them a pretty accurate view into the past. The Great Kiva at Lowry Pueblo, which we did not go to, is considered one of the northernmost great houses in the region. This site is accessible to visitors, and it includes an interpretive trail and picnic area. This is an example of a kiva that would be used for community ceremonies. After our visit to the Canyons of the Ancients, we loaded up and headed to Mesa Verde National Park, which was only about 20 minutes away. We arrived at Moorfield Campground early in the afternoon and had to hunt around for a campsite that was somewhat level and long enough to accommodate our 31-foot travel trailer. After finding a spot that would suffice for 2 nights, we had lunch and then headed out for a drive to get a lay of the land. On our drive, we found several dwellings that were accessible by a short walk from the road, including this Farview House and the Pipe Shrine House. The Pipe Shrine House was named because of a dozen pipes found in a box inside the kiva, which led archaeologists to believe that this particular kiva was predominantly used for religious ceremonies. At roughly 7,000 feet, your view for miles is spectacular. Up here on the mesa is where the ancient Pueblo people farmed before they settled in this area. They were nomadic. But about 550 AD, they settled the area we now know as Mesa Verde. About 750 AD, they began building houses on the mesa, and by 1000 AD, they were making extensive masonry houses and became known as by the Spanish word pueblo, meaning village dweller. Around 1200 AD, they moved to the cliff dwellings, but continued to farm up on top of the mesa. They farmed beans, corn, and squash, but supplemented their farming with wild plants, deer, rabbit, squirrel, and whatever other game they could find. After our drive, we headed back to camp, where we were welcomed back by this herd of deer. They seemed to be used to people walking around and weren't bothered by us at all, likely because they're no longer hunted here. There was an amphitheater in the campground, and they gave a talk that night about the dark night sky. We didn't attend as we were tired from moving that day and wanted to rest up for our hike for the next day. We had an amazing view of the night sky from camp, though, and was able to capture pictures of the Milky Way and Orion's belt, which I took for my grandson Orion. Our first scheduled hike was down to the Longhouse. It's on the road past the Farview House and is a 12-mile drive on a steep, winding road that's limited to vehicles less than 25 feet in total length. Tickets for this ranger-guided hike must be purchased and are available from mid-May to mid-November. Longhouse is the second largest dwelling in the park and absolutely worth the time and effort it takes to get to it. It's a strenuous 2.25-mile round-trip hike, which has an elevation gain of about 130 feet. You climb two 15-foot ladders inside the dwelling, and you'll want to allow about 2.5 hours total for this hike. Since this hike involves strenuous activity, it's not recommended for people with heart or respiratory problems. The Longhouse has about 150 rooms, 21 kivas, and a row of storage rooms above the living community. It's estimated that between 150 to 175 people lived here at the height of its population. The architectural features of Longhouse suggest that this may have been a public place of Wetherall Mesa where people gathered to trade or attend community events, as the formal plaza at the center of this site is larger than any other dwellings, and it has benches and vaults and a raised firebox indicating that it was a dance plaza or a great kiva. Water was gathered in pools and from the spring at the back of the Longhouse. As you can imagine, water was a precious commodity in this community, and they used whatever means available to gather water for daily living. This regular kiva, as opposed to a great kiva, was used for rites and political meetings, and when you drive through southwest United States, you will still see kivas standing apart from the houses on the reservations. The Longhouse was a bustling community in its prime, and as I stood here, looking over the house and the surrounding landscape, you could almost hear the domestic dogs and turkeys as the children squealed at the farmers and hunters coming home with their harvest. It was a sobering experience to stand where ancient pueblos lived. Mesa Verde, Spanish for green table, was named by an unknown early Spanish explorer because the top of the mesa is perpetually green. The Mesa Verde archaeological region is an area of just under 10,000 square miles. At the height of the Puebloan population, it's believed that nearly 20,000 people populated this area between 1200 and 1250 AD. Then, just a few decades later, this area was deserted, leaving many now to wonder why. With no written historical record, we can only speculate as to the reason they left, leaving behind almost everything to be found hundreds of years later. This gave us an easy look into their daily lives, but left nothing behind that would explain their sudden exodus. They had developed a complex and enormous community and put in hours of strenuous work constructing these intricate dwellings. So you have to wonder, was it a drought that caused them to leave? Food shortages? Social conflicts? We'll never truly know what caused them to leave their homes and abandon life as they knew it. While the ancient Pueblos did not appear to have a developed writing system, they did leave behind remains and oral stories that have allowed researchers to reconstruct their history, and it was recently discovered that the people of Mesa Verde did have sophisticated mathematical knowledge. They used the golden ratio to build the Sun Temple here in Mesa Verde, which was the same ratio used at the Giza pyramids, the Parthenon, and the Mayan temples in Mexico. The golden ratio is a number that is similar to pi but not equal to pi. Pi is 3.14 and the golden ratio is 1.618, just a few digits of its infinite decimal form. This is fascinating since they had no known written language or written number system. Cliff Palace is the largest cliff dwelling in not only Mesa Verde, but in all of North America. Cliff Palace Overlook is the first stop on the Cliff Palace Loop. We were unable to make the loop as it was closed due to construction. We'll definitely take it next time, as this park was certainly one we'd like to see again. We met up with some fellow YouTubers while we were in Cliff Palace. It was like running into old friends. They were so friendly and welcoming. If you have a chance, go check out their channel at RV Texas, y'all. Cliff Palace contained 150 room and 23 kivas, so was similar in size to Longhouse, but as you can see from the pictures, definitely had a regal appearance. Out of the nearly 600 cliff dwellings in Mesa Verde National Park, nearly 75% have only 1 to 5 rooms, and many of these are single-room storage units. Cliff Palace is believed to have been a place of social significance where the Puebloans conducted administrative and ceremonial duties. The doorways in these dwellings were exceptionally small, as the average height of an ancient Puebloan man was about 5'4", and of a woman was about 5 foot, which is similar to Europeans at the same time period. The average life expectancy of this group was about 32 to 34 years of age, and contributed to by the infant mortality rate. Some people did live into their 50s and 60s, but about 50% of children died before they reached the age of 5 years. There were 3 primary construction materials: sandstone, mortar, and wooden beams. They shaped each sandstone block using harder stones that were collected from surrounding streams. The mortar is a mixture of local soil, water, and ash from the fire pits. The ash was special ash, though, from the local fauna. They would use chinking stones to fill in empty gaps as they mortared the sandstones together. Over the surface of the walls, the Puebloans decorated with earthly plasters made of pink, brown, red, yellow, or white, and these parts deteriorated with time quickly, so very few of them remain. After we left Cliff Palace, we drove up to Spruce Tree Terrace. The museum was currently closed, so we weren't able to go in there, but we did walk down the path to the Spruce Tree Overlook. There were many buildings to look at in this village, and the local fauna was impressive, like this yucca plant. You're able to access the other side of the canyon, as we saw people walking over there. John got a pretty good view of the dwellings on the other side of the canyon. We walked up the canyon and saw what looked like a dam built by the Puebloans for farming. This was likely one of their premium farming sites, as you can see by the way water has carved through the sandstone and by the amount of green grass growing here in late fall. We walked slowly back to the truck, just reminiscing about our time here in Mesa Verde and the changes American society has undergone in the last 800 years or so. Even with all the changes, this place has changed very little. They've built some new buildings, and we had cell phones to capture our visit, but the spirit of the ancient Puebloans still moves within these canyons, and you can almost feel them. Thank you for joining us on our lifelong vacation. As always, sit back, enjoy the scenery, and get busy making a life.